2-2.
Awesome. Great to be here with such heavy hitters on stage. Full disclosure, Darin is actually a part of our mission here at SubPac. Laurent to my left is an advisor to us, and Nicole is someone that we're heavily recruiting to get involved in what we're doing. And what we're doing over at SubPac is really creating a world where we go from just hearing sound to being completely immersed in sound, introducing the physical dimension of sound to a number of elements. Just for a little background information, our technology comes in two forms. One is a wearable form factor right here, and then we also have a seat-back version. Both are currently being used by music producers and sound designers in different worlds, gaming, VR, music, etc. And super excited to be here. For those of you that don't know, our relationship to sound as humans is already physical. The way we experience sound is a disturbance of air molecules that effectively travel to our body and hit our ears, but also hit our body. So in places like clubs, symphonies, anywhere there's loud sound, you're going to be physically feeling it. And that's what we're here to do and talk about is how tactile audio changes the way that humans experience sound. So we're going to cut it into four areas, really. Music, health and wellness, VR, and gaming. And I'm going to start off with just kicking it over to Darin, who can maybe tell us a little bit about how he's using tactile audio in his world, music, and also health and wellness as well.
Yeah, with music, I think bass culture is so predominant at the moment in the world. You go to these big festivals, these clubs where you have gigantic stacks of 18-inch speakers and they're moving air physically toward you, that feeling of being in a club where the bass hits you in the body, right? That's a feeling that's commonplace nowadays. And I come from a background of production in the UK, then moving over to the States here, where that type of music was underground. Now it's huge and it's everywhere. And it's because people love that experience, the physical experience of music. And that's what tactile audio is. It's the feeling, the physical feeling of music. So John bought me an early version of the SubPac a couple of years ago, and I tried it in the studio. And what I found was a couple of distinct advantages over using air as a medium for sound, traditional speakers. With something like this, and we'll set it up later on, you guys can try it afterwards and get a sense of it yourself, is that normally, when you have these huge arrays of speakers, they're moving air, it's bouncing around the studio and creating an inaccurate picture of the music that you're trying to mix as a music producer. The subs are very hard to monitor correctly, and then when you take it out to the club or into the festival, you're not getting the correct mix. The bottom end isn't hitting the speakers properly, so it's not hitting the audience properly. The SubPac allows you to avoid all of that because it's like a speaker transducer. If you get rid of the cone, get rid of the air between you and the speaker, get rid of the shape of the room which distorts the sound, and put that directly onto your body, like this. So it's moving your body in a way that a speaker would have to move air and create those inaccuracies with. So it's way better in terms of mixing as a music engineer, as a producer, and as a DJ. The second thing is you can turn up the SubPac and get that physical dimension of sound when you're mixing to feel what the music will feel like in a club without having to turn up the mids and highs, which are what gives you hearing damage. So that's a huge advantage already. We've got a couple of generations of kids who've grown up with hearing damage. It's only just starting to be quantified now because of these giant sound systems. A friend of mine who I came up with, who plays a lot of big gigs at the moment, Bass Nectar, his rig is 125 dBs in volume. That's like a jet taking off. To get that physical dimension of sound. Kids are spending 5 hours, 6 hours in this environment, ruining their hearing. You introduce tactile sound instead of the traditional mode of speakers moving large amounts of air, suddenly they can have all that physical weight in the sound, but without having to turn up the mids and highs, which ruin our hearing. So that's another great advantage for me in the studio, and as a producer and a person who's playing music out at gigs, I'm not hurting my fans' hearing. And then there's just the fact that the low end takes the most amount of energy to reproduce. So that physical impact that you feel when those bass lines hit travel the furthest. That's why they have noise ordinances around all these big venues in the States. There are a lot of venues that big electronic artists can't play because the noise ordinances tell them they can only have their level at, say, 100 dB or 95 dB. Again, add the SubPac into the mix. There's no air moving, which means the sound waves aren't traveling and pissing off the neighbors who are calling the police. And you can have that sensation, that full immersion, that groundedness in the musical experience, the weight, the impact of the music, without annoying everyone around you. So those three things alone were significant for me as a music producer, and really a game changer in many, many ways.
Now, in terms of just bringing music closer to bringing music closer to humanity, there's really an emotional connection that tactile audio really brings to the table. And maybe, Nicole, you can talk a little bit about, how tactile audio can be used to affect emotion in both gaming and VR.
Great. Yes. Are we on? Can you hear me? A little bit? There we go. All right. Excellent. So I'm the developer of Follow the White Rabbit. I've also worked in games for about 23 years. I'm the engineer, and we, on this particular title, and what I found fascinating was that, we started to really look at what is low frequency audio, what role does it play in the experience? And there's some really interesting things that on the low end, the audio is very visceral. It's really going right down into the brainstem, right down in the middle, down deep, and that's where you feel a lot of your emotions. And what we found is that these low frequency patterns did a lot of amazing things. Not only did it make in VR, you're removed from the world. So I would put this on my face, right? And I'm not here. I go somewhere else. But I don't have any physical interaction, at least right now, with the world. There's no tactile sense coming back to me. So what low frequency audio is doing, what the experience we're running for Follow the White Rabbit, is that it actually is bringing the player new sensations actually in the body, even though they're just feeling on their back, or even just the low frequencies in the ears. And this is why. Is that as you said, that the body is experiences sound as well as the ears do. And the biggest mistake that a lot of game design audio does is we just treat the ears like eyes. It's like, okay, I put one sound into here in the left, I put another slightly different sound on the right, and I have stereo. Well, in our case, in our game, we can turn around all the way, 360 like this. How do you replicate that experience? So in the low frequency, what we found is that people would get, you can actually create different emotional reactions to different events depending on what kind of audio you're actually hearing. So if you've got a big creature coming towards you, or in our game we have these big magic effects, if you would feel it if you were there. You would feel the wind, hit your body. But if instead we had the sound of these low frequency sounds, you can actually mimic the sound in your, on your skin. You can mimic the feeling of weight in your body. Those low frequencies come up through your feet, and you feel it in your bones in the real world. If we're hearing stuff that's like that, it'll actually trick our body into feeling like we're actually feeling those in our feet, even though it's just in the sound. And if we have something like a tactile audio on our back, or other parts of our body, we're actually feeling like we are more there. And that's really the holy grail, is to be able to feel something physically, tactily, haptically, when I've got a pair of magic goggles strapped on. And the second thing, real briefly, is that it also we're just starting some new research, so we'll see how it goes. And I'm very excited that the patterns in these low frequency audios can actually mimic and gender different emotional states. And so that, by a lot of musicians in the audience, I'm sure you agree, it's like, well, yeah, music can make you feel a lot of ways. But taking it apart quite a bit more, I've been using tactile audio as a research tool, and what we've discovered that's unbelievable is that the patterns in these low frequency audio tracks can actually mimic the way the body physically reacts during an emotional state. So the trembling of fear, the excitement, the champagne kind of feeling of excitement, curiosity, wonder. Wonder has a tickling sensation that goes up the arm, up the back of the neck. We worked on several of the Myst series, the game Myst. Those you could actually create with patterns in this low frequency audio. Enhance it with a physical representation of that as well. And if the person's already curious, they're going to get amazingly curious. So we are just amazed. We are just on the brink. And so without having to strap on a full, kind of a full suit, we can have this low frequency audio to really enhance the emotions that people feel in reaction to gameplay, and then they're feeling that they're actually in that space.
Great, well said. Laurent, you've been in the VR space and very much at the forefront of not just the resurgence of VR, but really since early days. Maybe you can talk a bit about your experience in tactile audio and how it relates to stuff you've done in the past, but also the kinds of things you're working on now with Red Pill, which is going to absolutely blow minds. I've had a chance to take a sneak peek at it. A music platform for VR that's unbelievable. You want to talk a bit about that, Laurent?
Sure. Clearly, VR is all about creating a sense of presence, and so the suspension of disbelief. And we're finally crossing that line after 25 years or more, right? And the tactile element is, in my opinion, one of the most important peripherals that we're going to see adopted in VR. After the visual and the sound, you want to feel. I mean, all the points that you two have made are dead on. Clearly, even in the early implementations of some of the military simulation systems and the entertainment systems that I've had, we had tactile in a form of transducers, and that augments seriously the sound that we have. But I happen to think that the elements that you have when you add tactile sound in VR can actually help in storytelling.
Yep.
It can actually help in perception of the sound. There's the McGurk effect. I don't know if you know about this, but essentially none of what we perceive is a fact. It's only interpreted. So if you have a sense that's overriding certain information, you're going to perceive the same information differently. So essentially by playing with positional tactile sound, with tactile sound itself, in mixing some of the visual elements, the audio element, and the tactile element, you can tell different stories. And you could direct in storytelling, in gameplay, in music, various feelings.
Good point. What have you had much experience, early days with any different types of tactile technologies? Like, has anything else come across your radar, whether it was early days or recently?
I mean, in the early days, we've used basically transducers type technologies, which you have kind of in theme parks environment. In our current effort, we're trying to tie essentially the visuals and the sound. So we're deconstructing music in real time into its individual element, its instruments, because we don't listen to frequencies, we listen to instrument, and we create a technology that visualizes them in VR. So we think that's going to be a really powerful way to experience music. And so to complement that, you need to feel. And so the tactile element, not just for the gaming aspect and for the storytelling aspect of VR, but for the music aspect of VR, I happen to think is a really critical element to complement the overall experience of immersion.
Well said. Darin, you've been doing a lot of work in the health and wellness world with the deaf and hard of hearing, and it's important to know that tactile audio provides a new profound relationship to sound for people that effectively haven't had one. So I know you've done some stuff with some concerts for the deaf and hard of hearing and other elements. What can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, we've all been moved by music, right? Are there any music fans in here? Anyone like music? Right, we're all fans of music. It's one of the most profound things in life, and I think a lot of us here will believe that music is one of the highest products of human beings, human culture. Yet there's a certain sector of human beings out there that can't actually appreciate music in the traditional way. What tactile audio allows is for deaf people to experience music viscerally, directly through their body without having to use the ear as a medium. So when wearing something like, do you have the wearable there, John? When wearing something like this, which is like a low-profile backpack, there's two big transducers here. We actually produce one that's opened out to 4 times the frequency. This one goes from 5 hertz, super low, like the lowest rumble you feel in an explosion on a film, up to about the area of where a bass guitar goes. But we can open these out 4 times the amount. Now, for you and I, we'd hear a lot of audio artifacts that aren't that good to listen to because it's a tactile transducer, not a speaker transducer. For deaf people who can't hear it, they don't give a shit. They just want to feel more, right? So we put these ones that go 5 hertz to 500 hertz on deaf people. It allows them to appreciate the music without having to rely on hearing. I did a gig in Russia recently, and I had a couple of SubPacs on me. I always carry a couple of SubPacs with me wherever I go, as you do. And I put a little message out on Facebook saying if any of the deaf community want to come to the gig, I'll take an out from my DJ mixer directly into the SubPac so they can experience, they can feel my DJ set. They'll never hear it, but they can feel it in real time while I'm playing. And about 6 or 8 of these kids turned up, and they were just rotating through the SubPac. And they'd be standing there when they didn't have it on, kind of, jiggling around to the music. They'd have to go up to the subs like this. This is a big sub speaker down here, and kind of hug it to get any sensation of the music. Stick them in the SubPac, and suddenly it's just fists in the air. They're raving out like the rest of the crowd, and it's the most beautiful thing. For me, it's one of the most compelling aspects of the SubPac, because I love music. It's changed my life. And it's kind of fucked up for people not to be able to experience music in my mind. Everyone should have music available to them. And this is headphones for deaf people. So there are a bunch of different programs that I'm working on at the moment in tandem with SubPac. Deaf organizations like the Music Project in Dominican Republic, where we're developing a music curriculum for deaf people. So they can not only experience but learn about music, learn to write music, learn to compose music, learn to play music. So that's a beautiful thing. And then working with deaf schools around the world in order to show people the potential for tactile audio to open up this beautiful world that all the rest of us take for granted.
Could I add just a sentence to that?
Please do. Yeah.
I think music is an awesome thing, and then also just adding on to that for people who have low hearing, is it also can just simply be a life tool, because you get a lot of warnings intuitively. A lot of warnings in life come to you on a lower frequency level, whether it's a large bus going to mow you down when you're on your bicycle, or a big Tyrannosaurus Rex coming towards you. So it's a very intuitive system to take touch, in a sense, use touch, pairing that with a microphone that might just be, out in the world, looking out in the world, and you could get a really interesting kind of warning system. I think that's kind of fun too. That's interesting too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're feeling the physical dimension of sound. We're feeling all the time. We just don't realize it's a lot less conceptual. Like, we're so literate visually and hourly, they say 75% of our brain is used in computing visual information. Hourly, that's where language is, so we're very literate there. But there's a whole load of other sense data going on, of which a large part is tactile, that we take for granted. And tactile audio allows people within the games and VR world as well to experience that more viscerally, to exaggerate the effects of that. But also for people who don't have hearing, to experience that in a way that makes the world make more sense to them.
I mean, really, this is the intersection between touch and sound, right? And that's the interesting element, is you start to play with multiple senses, and that really bridges those two senses. Yeah. And there's a lot of power in that. And there's a lot of experiment. There's some TED Talks about using tactile to actually kind of rewire the brain for communication. There's a lot of really interesting area where you start to apply tactile into kind of a different mode of communication. So I think there's a completely uncharted territory as to how tactile can be used in interactive, immersive content.
Yeah, if you go into that a little bit further for VR, one of the big elephants in the room or whatever is motion sickness. And we're finding that the tactile component of having some kind of feedback, vibration somewhere on the body really helps with immersion. It also helps with motivating why my ears are feeling a little weird right now. So it's really helping. I think the low frequency audio and tactile audio will help reduce sim sickness as well, because you're just trying to figure out, what is this rumbling about? Oh, okay, I'm having this weird experience. I'm mapping those two together. Okay, that's fine. I'm just going to go with it. So there's really cool applications for VR there as well.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry.
I mean, I remember, like, I give a lot of VR demos, right? And one of the demo I love to give is this blue demo from WeVR on the Viv. And you have this moment where the whale comes out, and you hear and you feel that giant animal, and you have the scope in VR, there's just the sense of scale is just phenomenal. And at the same time, it just reached down to your bones. And you're like, wow, what a majestic moment, right? So this taking you over the edge from a presence standpoint is what we've accomplished with VR. And then getting you beyond that with the actual feeling of tactile sound is why I'm saying that this is going to be one of the most important peripherals for VR systems.
Yeah, we don't have full sim suits yet. We can't just zip up and go into the holodeck. But if we can, we've got just enough kind of tools with tactile audio to really feel that we're really there.
Awesome. I think is it time up here? Is that? Yeah. Look, thanks to these rock stars to my left here, Laurent, Darin, and Nicole, all bringing a different perspective to sound and the physicality of it. Definitely follow what they're doing. They're doing some incredible stuff, and thanks to them for taking part in this panel.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
here.
guys.
Thanks for having us. And if anyone wants a demo, I'll be back there. If anyone wants to try it out,
There's going to be some demos back there if you want to try out the SubPacs, get a dose of tactile sound on you, and also you're going to have your game.
I'll have, Follow the White Rabbit just in the back of the room there if you want to try it.
See you back there. Thank you.